So, as you all know, we are concerned about uncertainty in visualization, and now we change sort of back to the physical world, and there happens to be kind of extraordinary concerns in the tactility of such a backdrop into the physical world, which is not only physical but tactile. So the trouble is that, contrary to what we usually do, we cannot control what people see, what we call virtual photography, because you can walk around the model and you can even touch it. But being able to touch it makes it even more interesting. So the message comes from the museum. The museum, the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, are now under reconstruction, renovating. And it's closed for the next couple of years. It's going. This room, this hall is going to be open in 27, but the whole museum probably in 2043. So until then, you might see this space from 27, but maybe not. But on that occasion, they asked us to rebuild the two physical models that are in front of this original altar piece. So on the right hand, I didn't know that it was going to be part of a talk this year, because this photography is about more than 10 years old. So this is the mountain of the city, showing the old state, and there on the left, which you can't really see, is the model of the altar itself, and both are going to be reconstructed. And the trouble what the museum sees is how to do this, and especially because digging is still underway. So this is a quite 23 last year ongoing excavation, and when this building is going to be registered, we will have to integrate it into our overall town model, which you all know probably. So, the problem is now we cannot control what the people see, but we still want to do something for the museum. And tactility means different purposes. First is how is guaranteed that people can touch the model. That leads to a maximum width of this thing. It's going to be about that tall, but wheelchair people also need to touch it, so it hasn't to be too high, low enough. Then arm's length towards the middle of the model needs to be guaranteed from both sides, of course, or four sides. So the museum decided to choose a section of that mountain and make this section sort of exemplary for the whole city. But the trouble is that the city is growing, and while we're doing this tactile model, we are also enlarging the Roman extension in the valley, which is about here and a little further, and from the top you see this. And to have the visitor understand all that, it would have been a great idea to have the whole city model in tactility and physical presence in the museum. But the director decided to do a section because of that arm, and to have the altar in the center about of the model, so that the visitor understands that the altar is the main concern of the model. So this is already a section, but within this section we tried to choose a section that represents the city in a way that makes it understandable in different aspects. So one is the density of the urban fabric, the vernacular city, which is the main difference between the old model and the contemporary model, which is all this stuff over here, which is not part of the great constructions, but is the surrounding, as we call it, urban texture. Now you see these four colored framed sections which emphasize different things, and for the museum it was very important to have this altar sort of in the center of the model, that people understand, standing in front of the original altar, that the model is talking about the same thing. Now we had, during this discussion, we had the idea, so just imagine that piece being 2.5 by 1.5 meter long and broad, so you can reach it somehow. And understanding that this altar is just in front. So the first thing was to move the position from the right side of the hall to the center, standing right in front of the altar, so that you see it here in small size, and then just lift the head and see the same thing in the same orientation behind that. So that led to the selection of the orientation of that section that is perpendicular to the altar. So it's the green one, as you can see. And still, there was the question of the size, so they decided to make it quite small. And so we have these possibilities, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you see number 4 is perpendicular or orthogonal almost to the altar. But that's only one thing. The other thing is the topography. And as you could see in this model, it's quite wavy. So we have a lot of hills. And the former model was the cap of the hill, which led to the perception that the landscape is quite comfortable, which is absolutely not. It's steep, and it's the end of a mountain ridge, so it's really steep all around. There's a long flat valley on the foot, but on the other side, it's like a mountain shape. So what we wanted to mediate through the model also is this wavy landscape. So we chose a section, the green one, which at the same time indicates, in the sense of the cut walls around the model, near the 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, that the visitor immediately perceives the waviness of the landscape. So that section has the advantage that so either side that you approach the model from, you see waves, big waves, indicating that it's a wavy landscape. And also of course, for tactility. Now, the next big discussion was, is tactility something, this thing in the, is tactility something that relates to a kind of industry standard? And we have representatives of organizations that are dealing with visual impairment, and they are convinced that tactile models need to follow very, very strict rules, very simple geometry, and very obvious distinction in the surface quality. For example, if you have a painting, take this one, and then you would make this area flat, and the area with the stripes with very obvious linear structure, tactile structure, and then you would probably take the text as it is and do some dots over here. So you have 3 different textures, and you can really touch them with the back of your hand. Now, as this would lead to a model which would not look like a city, but would look like a visually impaired instructionary surface, the museum decided to do a model that suits both, which is, strictly speaking, impossible. But we are in the discussion of making this, taking the chance that this model is abstract anyway, to demand from the visually impaired visitors to be challenged in a positive way by the detailedness of the model, in the hope that after some time they would learn to feel the difference between city texture, like this one, and larger structures that just have a completely different setup. And that's the hope, and this is what the museum wants to try, in a sense, against the rules of visually impaired instructory tactile models. And in this sense, our uncertainty approach goes into the same direction. So we all hope it will work, and we sort of trust in the will to experiment and in the tactile experience and learning capabilities of those people who would then touch this model. Now, the next difficulty is how to make a model that is as fragile and as detailed, tactile, in a way not to be destructed, by coincidence, of course. But on the other side, we have lots of school classes, so they actually count with trials to try the rigidity of the model. This is the height. So as you can see, from a wheelchair sitting at that height, you can also, that was the aim, you, in some way, at least being an adult, you can reach the altar. It's all quite balanced. Now, tactility means, this is a model that we have developed together for the Palatine castles. And this was the first time when we differentiated between a visualization and a tactile model, which at that time it was not tactile, but it was physical at least. The difficulty between changing from a visual to a physical model is the materiality of the model, of course. But that leads to design decisions, and that's the important thing, and this is what we negotiated about a lot. So the main thing is freestanding columns. And the freestanding columns will be the main problem also for the tactile model, even harder than here. But even here, we had the stability trouble. You can see it from the picture. This is this pressed 3D gypsum-like material which is glued and then vacuumed to remove the powder which is not glued. So the difficulty was to develop kind of a language of semi-freestanding columns to indicate the architectural idea of freestanding columns, in contrary to a closed facade with only pushed in something. And we tried this with lots of archaeologists and art historians and came to the conclusion that this is obviously an indication of freestanding columns, while these columns are also freestanding, but nobody would seriously read those supporting walls as being authentic antique design, but on the contrary, relate this to the model. So with this trouble, or not, we have even more problems now with the tactility. On the other hand, the stability of the material is much higher. So this is gypsum, and the new one will be Korean. This is for bathtubs, and you know what. Okay, fantastic. So freestanding and not. It's drilled and not printed, and it can be bent and drilled only. So what we can do is have a massive block, bend it towards the slopes of the mountain, and then have a 5-axis drill and then drill into and try to achieve this geometry. We have no idea how it comes out. The producing model shop is promising high detail as long as the drill reaches these positions. So what we want to do, it's still not done, give test models to the producer and think about the availability of space and then see what happens. So this is why these images are taken from above. Because what we hope is that the way we look at this model here now from above is the same as the drill will see it, as the public will see it. So if the public looks from the same angle as we do, and the drill, it'll work. Anyway, we delivered that model to the producer, and the producer, as we are absolutely common and experienced with this reaction, when we send season's greetings, we always get a call, that's a mistake. No, that's graphic design. And in this case, it's not art, no. It's a technical assemblage of the most difficult and most intriguing and interesting surfaces that we have in the overall model. For example, this is not a head of a temple, it's a section of the slope. We want to see how far triangles, this is a different dimension of faceted surface. This is another size and dimension of the triangles. This is a third triangulation. This is yet another one. And we have in each roof area, we have a different tiling. See it here also. So it's just a test object. And if this is going to be done, and the first company, unfortunately from Paris, just gave up. So we have the other one now working on that model. And if this comes back, then we will know and see for the first time, and they don't have the experience either, which geometry looks which way after being drilled and change from visual to tactile quality. And then we will transform the whole model again. We hope not, but in the worst case, that might happen. So next year, I hope I can show you photos of the model, because then it's the museum not open, but the model will be done. And until then, I introduce you now for the last couple of seconds to a very beautiful castle in Berlin, which is called the Castle of Charlottenburg, which is one of the most prominent and attractive quarters in Berlin. We're not staying in that, but it's very attractive. And just opposite this famous castle is a museum called the Cast Collection. And as you can see here, they host a gypsum copy of the Gruppo Ludovisi, which is in Rome, and not in the capital, in a museum that's sort of called a municipal antique museum also. And this is where we scanned it, and this is where we also recontextualized this in front of architecture. And it's the next EVA conference, Berlin. As you may remember, Andreas Bienert, the founder of the Berlin branch, retired last summer and is still active and needed some institutional takeover and asked me, and I gladly took it over, and we did a first Berlin EVA in 23 last November. We had difficulties to get a room, but we are very lucky with this Cast Collection, and they didn't have space in November, so we switched to March. Just be careful, it's not November, it's March. It's much prettier in Berlin. It's warm, it's long days, it's spring, and you're very much invited. All right.
Thank you. There's two out.